Hello and welcome once again to Loveland's Talking. My name is Andy Hiller. I'm with the Public Information Office here with the City of Loveland to share with you, the public, information about what's going on with your city government. Today we're going to talk about a major change for the fire department. You might even consider it kind of a complete makeover. No, the trucks won't change color from red to blue or be traded in for hybrids, although perhaps you guys are considering that down the line. Who knows? Okay, the firefighters won't change, nor will there be more or fewer fire stations. However, the whole nature of the fire department as we know it will change, but for the average folks like you and I, it will be pretty much invisible. Am I confusing you? Do I have you a bit intrigued, perhaps? I hope so, because I want you to stay tuned and learn about what is going to become the Loveland Fire Rescue Authority. A new phrase, perhaps, for you, certainly for me. So let's begin by first meeting our guests, and they will tell us a bit about their relation to the fire department / fire authority. We'll start with the fellow whose face may be a bit familiar here on the end.
Thank you, Andy. I'm Randy Morowski, and I'm the fire chief here with Loveland Fire Rescue Authority. That'll in January anyway. I've been in the fire service for almost 38 years. I've been the fire chief here in Loveland for 3 years, and I consider myself at the present time the fire chief of Loveland and the fire chief of the Loveland Rural Fire Protection District.
Okay, we'll learn what all that means here shortly.
I am Greg White. I am a lawyer practicing in Loveland. I've been associated with the Loveland Rural Fire Protection District since 1978.
Wow.
My official title is Secretary Assistant Treasurer of the Rural District. I do provide some legal services, but my most important service to the district is administrative.
Very good. I'm Renee Wheeler. I am currently the Public Safety Administrative Director and have previously served as the Assistant City Manager here in Loveland. I am honored to be able to serve in this new capacity. I've been in finance and budgeting, which is my primary responsibility in this new organization for just over 25 years. So I'd like to bring what I can to this organization as we move into the future.
I'm Jeff Swanty, and I'm a board member with the Loveland Rural Fire District and was recently elected to be a board member of the new Fire Authority. I've worked with the development and the study of the Fire Authority for the last 3 years.
Okay. So you've used a couple of different terms here. What I consider the fire department, which is the folks here in town, in Loveland, and you've been using a rural fire district. I always have trouble with the word rural. Those two R's found me up. And anyway, so we're going to talk about that. First of all, let's look at this map here. The yellow area, you can tell by the lakes where Boyd Lake and Lake Loveland and the city of Loveland is, so it gives you kind of an overview of the width here. What are we looking at here? Chief?
Andy, what we're looking at here is really the entirety of the City of Loveland and the Loveland Fire Protection District, the Loveland Rural Fire Protection District. There is, in actuality, 194 square miles of area that we're responsible for. So it's the City of Loveland, and then surrounding it is the Loveland Rural Fire Protection District.
Okay, and these are kind of two different but very closely related organizations, and they're going to become even more closely related come the first of the year.
Very much so. They are very different in their geography and in their nature, but we have a fire department that has provided services to both for many years.
Okay. You mentioned geography. This is kind of a topographical map of the area. If you look closely, you can see the outline of the districts on there as well. And of course, most of us are familiar with the urban area, and so you have quite a lot of different terrain you guys have to deal with, or the firefighters themselves have to deal with.
Yeah, that's correct, Andy. We have probably the an area that has a little bit of everything from city urban responsibilities. We even have some high-rise buildings that you would find in a large urban area. We certainly have the area of single-family, multi-family dwellings. But beyond that, as you start moving out both directions, we find to the east more of a flat land, more of an approach where you see more agricultural farmland, those kinds of areas. We refer to the flatter lands. And then as we move to the west, things get very interesting there. Now we have more of the what we refer to as the wildland urban interface and the more mountainous terrain that we're responsible for. So in totality, we have a little bit of everything in this fire protection district.
Okay. And, most of us, this slide represents trucks from both the regular city urban district and the rural district. Most of us are pretty familiar with the concept of the city or the regular fire department, as I would call it. Would one of you guys like to speak about, kind of give us the flavor of the rural district and what's involved there?
Sure, Andy. Just a little bit of background and history. The rural district was formed in 1950, and it is if you can go back to the first slide, I would appreciate we could talk about that.
Let's see if we can do that. That one
right there, yes.
Yeah, okay.
That is generally the boundary that was formed in 1950, and the rural district comprises all of the boundary outside of the boundaries of the city of Loveland. So Loveland is the hole in the donut, and the rural district surrounds the city. It's a special district, which means it's a local government entity in Colorado. It's governed by a board of 5 directors. Jeff is one of the directors on that board. And it was formed for the purpose of providing fire protection and emergency services for the area outside of Loveland, including the Big Thompson Canyon area, which is the area to the left. We go up the Big Thompson Canyon about 3/4 of the way to the town of Estes Park. And also, we serve the Masonville area in the north and the Carter Lake, Pinewood Lake area in the southwest, as well as the I-25 corridor to the east.
So I'm going to switch to a different slide because you mentioned a donut, and we have it's not a round donut, it's kind of a square donut here, rectangular donut, if you will. So that kind of represents the area that people like me think of as serviced by the regular fire department. And you're talking about all the area inclusive or around that in yellow. Is that correct?
That's right.
So it's not only the area just to the west, but in some cases to the east, north, and south as well.
Yes, it is.
Well, one thing I found interesting in talking to you guys earlier was that, and so explain this to me, in some cases, do you or do you not have folks from the rural, or do you try and prevent a crossover so that folks from the rural area don't have to go through the city and out the other side to get to an area that is operated by the rural district? I'm not making myself very clear, but hopefully you know what I'm trying to say.
Andy, I know what you're asking here. Our system's a little different in the respect that the City of Loveland operates with a contract to provide fire protection services in the rural district. So we don't really have, per se, rural stations that surround the city that have to drive through it. The same firefighters that are responding to a structure fire, for example, in the city, would respond to one in the rural district as well.
I say even to the south and the east is shown.
That is correct.
On this map. Okay.
Andy, what might kind of help this all make sense is the rural district is actually its own government entity, and we're funded by a mill levy that the taxpayers pay there.
Okay.
We could, if we wanted to, have our own fire department, but economically that doesn't make sense. So we have a contract with the city of Loveland, who provides fire protection outside the city limits. So if a person should have a car accident, say at Glade Road and West Eisenhower, they see a Loveland fire truck pull up, that would be the reason why. That relationship's very invisible to the citizens.
Okay. That helps. Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, so let's talk. We've talked a bit about the area of responsibility. Just how many miles east to west does that represent there? Can anybody give me a ballpark on that?
I don't know geography-wise, Andy, how far that...
Where is the Drake intersection on there?
The Drake intersection is where that middle red dot is.
Okay.
That's the Drake and the Glen Haven Road intersection.
So
I think it's about 24 miles from 25 up to the western boundary.
Yeah.
And how far is that from Estes Park, for example?
The western boundary is about 5 miles from Estes Park.
Wow. So you've got the whole canyon and everything
Yes.
alongside, on either side of it, going almost up to Estes Park.
For those who drive the canyon, the Seven Pines Resort is the boundary line to the west.
I see. And is there a department in Estes Park then that
Yes,
comes the other direction?
The Estes Park Fire Department covers that from that line west through Estes Park.
I see.
And maybe, Greg, you could mention the Big Thompson Fire Department and how it relates to the district.
Yes, the district does maintain a separate volunteer department in the Big Thompson Canyon called the Big Thompson Canyon Volunteer Fire Department. And if you drive up the canyon and just east of Drake, there's a fire station there. That's their main fire station, and that was built by the rural district to provide a base for that volunteer organization. Now, that's composed of about 20 volunteer firefighters who cover that specific area of the canyon and up in the Cedar Springs and Cedar Park area. They work hand in hand with the Loveland Fire and Rescue Department with regard to service, but they are solely a part of the rural district and not of the city fire department.
Okay, so I'm guessing then if there's a fire or something that needs to be taken care of in that part, the alarm, if you will, or the call goes out to both the volunteer folks and to what I'll call the city fire department. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct. We work very closely with the Big Thompson Canyon Volunteer Fire Department. It's really, as Jeff indicated earlier, it's really more of a seamless relationship and operation.
Okay, and in terms of volunteers, is there a volunteer organization for the city and the rural district as well?
That is correct, Andy. We actually operate within Loveland Fire Rescue there's 3 tiers of our staffing. We have 65 full-time firefighters, we have 12 part-time paid firefighters, and then we have approximately 20 volunteers. And then the Big Thompson Canyon has about 17 volunteers up there as well. Our numbers of our volunteers fluctuate pretty dramatically here within Loveland Fire's core.
Okay. And how about the cool stuff, the trucks, the equipment, the ladders, the hoses, the pumps? I've seen it, and we saw on the other slides that some of the trucks just say City of Loveland Fire Department, and some say rural district.
Could you bring that slide back up, Andy, where the 2 fire trucks are?
Yeah.
I'd like to comment on that.
That one there?
Yeah, that's a great slide, and it's
Okay.
really pretty indicative of what we operate with. That fire truck on the left side of the screen that says Loveland Fire Rescue on it is our newest fire engine. And a little plug here, that was actually built and produced right here in Loveland by SVI Truck Supervac Incorporated. They built that fire engine for us. That's a Loveland homegrown engine. And it's an urban engine. It responds mostly to, it's an urban-built engine for the urban response. The one in the lower corner, though, if you look, it's quite a bit different. It's a little shorter wheelbase. It has 4-wheel drive, and on that door, it's hard to see it, but it says Loveland Rural Fire Protection District. So this gives you some idea about the differences in the geography, the terrain, the response, and the equipment as well as different. We operate with 5 engine companies and 1 truck company. That truck company is a ladder truck, does support work and that sort of thing. Does the laddering, the ventilation, that sort of thing. The engine companies primarily do the application of the water and water supplies. So that's our core operation within the city.
And the rural trucks, where are they located physically?
They're located, most of the rural equipment is located within the city fire stations and is used by the Loveland Fire and Rescue Department to respond to both rural and city incidents. So we buy equipment, and we try to buy equipment that is more suited to rural response. However, these engines are used by the city fire department to respond within the city. Once again, as the chief has pointed out, this is a seamless response. So depending on where the incident is, the nearest apparatus responds, and it responds through personnel of the city fire department. We do house some of our equipment in the Big Thompson Canyon stations, but the majority of our equipment is with the city fire department.
I see. So at an incident somewhere, it would be likely to see both trucks? Or
Very much
both
so.
labels on the side?
Very much so.
Okay. Okay.
The only difference is when you see the Loveland Rural Fire Protection District, that was purchased by the rural district and is owned by the rural district, and the city truck is owned by the city of Loveland.
I see.
So once again, all the equipment is used for both the rural district and the city.
I got you. Okay. Cool. Okay. All right. Well, you mentioned purchase, which brings up funding and money. So let's talk about that, and that especially will lead into how all this is changing, is my understanding. Would one of you like to discuss funding and where the money comes from for both the city and the urban district, at least currently?
Let me open it up for us. As we put together the fire authority budget, there'll be a small amount of revenue that the fire department generates itself from permitting and that sort of thing. Once you subtract that revenue from the budget, the balance is a contribution 82% from the city and 18% from the rural district. So as you know, most of the revenue for the city comes from sales tax.
Right.
Well into 60% of the total general fund budget, which would pay for this operation, comes from that source. Beyond that, I'll let Greg talk about where the rural district gets its money.
Yes, the rural district being a special district.
And we're talking currently.
Currently,
In
yes.
December, not in January.
Well, no, the funding will remain the same for the rural district. The rural district receives its vast majority of its fund from property taxes.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
And that money comes to the rural district versus a mill levy assessment.
Right.
And the rural district's mill levy is 5.8 mills, and it's been the same since 1992. That produces approximately $1,400,000 worth of revenue each year to the rural district today. We will use that money to fund the rural district's portion, the 18% of the overall budget of the Loveland Fire Rescue Authority. Currently, we pay 65% of our revenue to the city pursuant to the contract that we're operating under, and they have been operating under for the last 5 years. That contract will terminate on December 31st when the Fire Authority takes over in January 1st of 2012.
Okay. And we have a slide here that kind of compares today's level of funding, correct?
Right.
To other communities in and around us. There it is there. And you see we're way down on the bottom on the left side. What does that mean? What's the importance of this?
Well, I think you need to understand that cost per capita is simply the cost of operations divided by the population. And the population that we're using here is the combined population of both the rural area and the city, and that's about 88,000.
Okay.
So the citizens are definitely getting a bargain. One of the primary concerns we have is the companies that respond to incidences at this point rely heavily on volunteers, and we typically respond with a two-person company, and we need to, for the safety of the firefighters and the quality of the service delivery, move to a three-person company. So we're hoping this relationship will help us build to that category. We're at about an $8.5 million budget, and that includes services that will be provided by the city to the authority. So that's in the neighborhood of $780,000. That would be facilities, accounting, legal services, those types of services. Mm-hmm. If you were to subtract that indirect service from the total budget, the difference between the adopted budget in 2011 and the Fire Authority budget in 2012 is a decrease of 0.9%. So my point here
Yeah.
is that we've been very fiscally responsible with developing the budget, and we're excited about the fact that we've put together a 10-year plan for operations, what's necessary to deliver this basic model of service, and replace our equipment, and plan for station expansion and construction as it may be necessary over the future years.
Okay, so basically what we're talking about here is the funding and the contractual arrangement that you guys have had for a number of years is going to change, and it's going to become instead something known as the Fire Authority, encompassing both of the two units, the urban and the rural.
That is
Still
correct.
have trouble with that. Yeah.
That is correct.
Okay.
I think maybe a way that the viewers might be able to understand this a bit better is that, as you've heard several times in this group, we've talked about a seamless operation, and we're primarily looking at that for the services that you receive from the firefighters. The goal of the Fire Authority is to create that same seamless perspective in operations at the governance level. That is really what we're striving for.
And this will replace the contractual arrangement you guys have had in the past. And I know you were very adamant about explaining kind of how this will be different and more beneficial in terms of governance and negotiating a contract, et cetera. Would you repeat that, Randy?
Yeah, I would, Andy. It is my belief, and I think we base this on a certain amount of research that we've done, and over time we've spent a good amount of time evaluating other governance models, and in a moment I'm going to ask Jeff to give us a little historical snapshot of that. But I think, to me, the greatest benefit for the Fire Authority and why this change is important for us is to create that long-term partnership, that lasting partnership, if you will, between the city and the rural district. We've had a good working relationship for many, many years, but as times have changed, when the contract relationship was built originally, the department may have been running somewhere around 500 or 600 calls. We're running 6,000 calls a year now.
6,000?
6,000 emergency calls a year.
Wow.
Those are emergency calls. Things have changed, and we need to build a governance model that can change with that and prepare us for the future, as Renee indicated. It might be very helpful, Andy, to have Jeff talk a little bit about historically how we got to this place. We didn't just wake up one morning and say, let's do a fire authority. There was a process that we used.
Jeff, I think you're on.
Okay. We've had a great working partnership for many years, as both the chief and Greg have alluded to. We've gotten along great, but we each represent two different entities, and every year we come together and we negotiate a contract, and each entity is looking for the best deal for their respective entity. Mm-hmm. And as everyone probably knows, we were very fortunate 3 years ago to recruit Chief Morawski to the department. He came with a vision of excellence, and one of the things we decided to do was to get together and talk about, do we have the best model? Are we providing the best service we possibly can to the community, not just to the city of Loveland, but the fire district as well, because there is a real sense of community here. There's many people that live in the district and work in the city, and there's people who live in the city and have a cabin in the district or travel outside the city limits, and we wanted to get to that next step. So the first thing we did was put together a exploratory committee, so to speak, to basically look at the different type governance models that are out there. We looked at a district, which we would combine the city and the district into one district, which was one governance model. We looked at authority, which is the one we're getting ready to move to. And we also looked at just leaving things the way they were. And I would say we spent probably close to a year, Chief, exploring all that. We had representation from people in the fire department. We had staff from the fire department, from the city of Loveland. We tried to get input from everybody.
We had citizens representation from our Citizens Fire Rescue Advisory Commission, so we had a good cadre of citizen representation as well.
Mm-hmm. And how long ago did that first committee, how long ago was that established? When did
Probably
you first
about
start
3 years
about
ago.
3 years ago, okay.
Yes. And it took us about 1 year before we reviewed everything. We felt at that time that the fire authority was the best model. So we went to the city council. We shared our findings with them, and they charged us with going back and looking if it would be feasible to migrate to a new authority. We spent another year on that. We went back to the city council again and the fire district too, and said, we think this will work. We think this is a great idea. So then we formed a third committee. And this third committee was to implement the fire authority, to look at going about it, who would do what, exactly how everything should be done. And once again, we went back to the fire district, went back to the city council, we told them what we found, and every way we looked at it, we found that a fire authority would best represent the citizens of the district and the city of Loveland both.
Okay.
I could add to that, Andy, just one bit. Jeff's done a great job of explaining that and explaining it very well. A very complicated process, but he really did a wonderful job. Probably the biggest difference in the second committee and the first committee was the analysis of it. The second committee did a tremendous amount of data gathering and analysis. And it was a long process for that. We generated a lot of information, a lot of data. The third committee, which I found to be really very beneficial to involve these individuals, we actually involved the policymakers and decision makers in the third committee. That third committee was made up of two members of our city council, including our mayor, Cecil Gutierrez. We also had two members from the Rural Fire Protection District, including Jeff. Jeff was actually our chairman of this Fire Authority Review Committee, and then one representative from the city manager's office. At the time it was Don Williams, but Don was ready to retire at that time, and he nominated and appointed Renee as that person, and then later when Bill Cahill has come online, Bill has now occupied that position. So these were policymakers and decision makers, and it helped us be able to look at it through their eyes, not just from the firefighters' eyes, which is important, or the citizens' eyes, again, very important, but political leaders needed to weigh in on this as well. And of course, this group was all supported by our staff, including Councilor White from the Rural District and several members of our city staff.
Okay.
Andy, I think the most important thing in that committee was for the first time, and as I said, I've been associated with the Rural District since 1978, the members of the Rural Board and members of the City Council sat down and examine the overall fire emergency system delivery system for the area, mainly the rural district and the city. And they sat down at the table and said, how do we do this? What do we do? And they adopted, first of all, a financial model for the next 10 years on how to provide better services to both the city and the rural district, and then determine how to do that in the form of an IGA. But this was the first time that the board sat down together and said, okay, let's look at this from a cooperative effort, not from the rural district, not from the city. And it was a wonderful experience, and it led to the fire authority.
Okay.
I think Jeff said it well when he captured community means that
Yes.
whole service area.
Sure, sure.
Yes.
Well, Renee, you alluded to a little bit ago when you were kind of summarizing the funding, a 10-year plan, and this new organization that is co-funded and working together will offer some long-term advantages. Would somebody like to speak of that? Because most of what we talked about is kind of internal and governance and that sort of thing. What will the fellow who lives on First Street see or appreciate or gain from this over the next 10 years?
I think, Andy, there's a couple of things with that. I think we're going to do a much better job from the governance side of planning for the future and being able to address more effectively the deficiencies that we currently have in our system. And we do have those. We have a very good fire department here, but we have areas of need. Those have been demonstrated as an example in 2008 when the Insurance Services Office, ISO, came in and evaluated our department, and they identified needs for our organization. Two of those critical needs was that we were short at least 2 fire companies, and we needed to staff all of our companies with a minimum of 3 people in order to provide the best protection for our community. So this will help us in that. I think another thing that may be a bit less obvious, but every bit as critical, is that I believe this fire authority will help maintain and even build a stronger relationship between the city and the rural district that we really need if this model is going to work. And maybe a way to look at this in sort of a converse is that if we didn't do something like this, and if that relationship between the city and the rural deteriorated, and both departments went their separate ways, it would cost the citizens of each group, the city and the rural district, more money for less service. That is not a good deal in anybody's book. Absolutely. So we believe the future is really going to be benefiting by this through a strong partnership between both entities.
I think that's very well put. Thanks.
We've been operating as partners a lot like a fire authority since 1950, like Greg said, but we haven't had all the attributes that go with having a fire authority. We're going to have a real true partnership now.
Yes.
And again, I think the community is going to appreciate the fact that we're approaching fire from a community perspective. What is in everybody's best interest? We'll no longer have to approach each other trying to negotiate the best contract once again.
Yes.
We're going to be able to operate as a team.
Okay.
Jeff makes a great point. One of our past fire chiefs, Dick Miner, used to say that operationally we had a fire authority, but not in the sense that we did on the governance side. That's where we needed the change.
I got you. So now you have it all kind of put together in one package for
Yes.
everybody's mutual benefit.
Yes.
Good, good. Well, we have a list of slides here, some folks that I think you just wanted to at least point out, and a couple of familiar names right there on here that have played major roles in here. Obviously, 2 of them, the folks here, are guests. 3, actually, with Randy there. And you mentioned Cecil and a couple of other folks as well. And we'll go on. These are some of the folks who served on those committees that you mentioned. And I see some of the same names repeated here. Some of you guys have been very active on this.
Yes. Okay.
And Renee, I see your name there as well. And lastly, some other folks that I assume have been involved in this for one reason or another that you wanted to just kind of acknowledge.
Yes, indeed. And we've had a lot of help with this, Andy, both regionally and throughout the state. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge particularly all the people that were up here, our council members, our rural board members, but also I want to also acknowledge the assistance that we have gotten from our neighbors to the north, Poudre Fire Authority. They've been a fire authority for 30 years.
And that's the Fort Collins area.
That's the Fort Collins area, yes.
Right, okay.
And they, with 30 years of operation, they have a certain amount of expertise and knowledge, and they have been more than willing to share that, both the Chief John Mulligan and Guy Boyd, their Director of Administrative Services.
Okay, cool. Well, folks, we began by showing a map of a lot of territory. We've verbally covered a lot of territory in explaining this today. Is there anything else you want to mention before we call it a day?
Well, it's certainly been a pleasure, I think, for all of us working together and getting to know and respect where each other was coming from. And again, going back to the people that have been key, I think we have to recognize Renee here, who's
Yes.
been very involved since day one, and getting through the financial piece of it has not been easy, and she's kept us on track and really helped us understood how we can make this work. And I'm not sure we really mentioned here on this financial piece, there isn't an added cost by going to the fire authority. Costs are going to remain the same. We're not putting on layers of staff. We're not having to go out and hire additional people as a result of having a fire authority. And also, we'd certainly like to recognize the mayor. When he started with us, he was on the city council, and that's busy enough in itself. And he was elected mayor, and we were very fortunate that he decided to stick with us during this whole 3-year process. He remained on the CD team with us and is involved right up to this day. And outgoing Councilor Larry Heckel, who's a past fire chief. He's been a volunteer fireman, city council, and I know we've mentioned their names, but I just think it's important to highlight how key these people have been.
I would agree with that, Jeff, and I want to acknowledge Councilor White, who's sitting to my right. Greg has brought a tremendous, just as much as Renee has brought in from the financial perspective from the city. Greg has brought in a great deal of knowledge from the operational side, financially from the rural district, and his historical knowledge of this organization has been huge for us to allow us to know where we've come from to help us to move forward.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. But I'd also like to acknowledge there are 4 more directors of the rural district. They are President Dave Leggett, who is on the various committees, Barry Gustafson, Andy Anderson, and Mike McKenna, who also have, from the rural perspective, have followed this through these 3 years and supported this wholeheartedly.
And will all these people continue to be involved under the new authority?
Yes, the rural district will remain, and the board of directors will handle the rural district. We're not dissolving the rural district by any means. It'll still be a local government entity. Mm-hmm. It'll still operate, but we'll operate in partnership with the city through the fire authority.
Good. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank the 4 of you for taking your time and sharing your expertise and experience with all of this with the rest of the community. And of course, as always, I want to thank the community, the city of Loveland, and hopefully the rural folks as well. I don't know if Channel 16, how far up does Channel 16 go? I'll have to look into that. I don't know the answer to that. But in any event, thank you all for tuning in once again for Loveland's Talking, and we will look forward to seeing you again next month. Have a happy holiday and a happy new year. Take care. Bye-bye.